Hello and welcome to more Doug DeMuro. Today I'm going to answer a question I've gotten from a lot of you, and it is, what is my favorite car that I've ever reviewed? Now, this question came from you on the More Doug DeMuro channel. I am answering viewer questions that I get via email. So if you have a question, send me an email at moredougdemuro@gmail.com. And then if it's a good question, if I get a lot of questions on a certain topic, I will answer it here on a video every week or two. And so today's video is about my favorite car that I've ever reviewed. And I'm going to split this into three different parts. Part one is, what is the best car I've ever reviewed? Overall, the objectively best, because I get this question a lot. And the answer is, whenever people ask me this, I always point them to the Doug Score spreadsheet, because the spreadsheet is intended to kind of show what is the best car I've ever reviewed. It looks at basically every category, and then it selects which car is the best based on its performance in all of those categories. And so it stands to reason that the number one car on the Doug Score spreadsheet should be the best car I've ever reviewed. And indeed, this is true. The number one car is the Bugatti Chiron, and I really do think that that's the best car that I've ever reviewed. Then again, it had better be, because it costs $3 million. But no car really combines the interior and the driving experience and the luxury feel of a Bentley or of a Rolls-Royce with the all-out performance and speed of a crazy Lamborghini like the Bugatti Chiron does. And a lot of people look at this car and they're like, oh, it's too expensive, it's stupid, I hate it, I'll never have one of those. And I get all that. Those arguments seem pretty reasonable to me, but if you really look at the car and think to yourself, where else can I have the most amazing, opulent luxury car in the world and one of the most incredible sports cars in the world combined, it does it all. And it's a truly impressive car, as you would expect it to be given the price. The other question I get, probably more than that one, is what is actually my favorite car? I love the Bugatti Chiron. I think it is a very special car and it's amazing, but it's not my favorite. It's a cool car, it's up there. I would have one if I had $1 zillion and a big airplane hangar, but the question is, what is your favorite? And obviously I've driven a lot of cars, so I have some good experience with this. And I truly still believe that my number one favorite car of all time is the Porsche Carrera GT. This was a supercar that Porsche made in the mid-2000s, truly special car, and probably the last real supercar that was also sort of a driver's car that you could really control yourself without too much electronic stuff going on. And there have been enough lawsuits that I suspect there will never be another car quite like that again. Now, if you've watched a lot of my stuff, you probably know that I worked for Porsche at some point. And so whenever I say the Carrera GT is my all-time favorite car, people always like, well, you worked for Porsche, you're biased. Actually, the truth is, I don't really love Porsches all that much. Certainly not more than other sports car brands. I think they're nice. I've only owned one. They're not, I don't think, tremendously more thrilling than any other brand. I don't really have a lot of bias in this arena. And I would never put a 911 on this list of my favorite cars or anything like that. I just think the Carrera GT was special. I put it this way. In the first century of cars, from the Model T and the early combustion engine cars all the way to basically the mid-2000s, late 2000s, I think Carrera GT was the high point, the high watermark, the best we ever did. And now we're in sort of a new era of electric cars and self-driving. And there have been some amazing cars that have come out of this era, the 918 Spider, the LaFerrari, Tesla, some truly incredible cars that are sort of taking the car on down a new path. But I think when we look back, we'll say that we refined the combustion engine car and changed it and melded it, and the very best we ever did was Carrera GT. We got to that point, and now we're kind of in a new frontier. And I really believe Carrera GT is certainly the greatest sports car ever made. And if you're a car enthusiast, the greatest car ever made. But of course, the Carrera GT is $700,000 or something. And so, the question then becomes, well, what's your favorite car that a rational human being can own? And the answer is, I'm driving them. The truth is, one could look at my channel as like a long extended test drive of basically every car. And then I've kind of chosen the ones that I really like. So my everyday car that I use, especially for highway stuff, is an AMG E63 AMG Mercedes station wagon. That car is number 2 on my Doug Score spreadsheet. I have a used one. I have a 2012 that I bought for like $45,000. because I can't afford a new one. But I really think the new one is probably the best all-around car on the market. It could be a family car and a sports car, and it has all-wheel drive. You can use it in the winter, and it has some of the best tech of any new car. Truly, that car as an all-around package is, and I mean this, unbeatable by any other vehicle in the entire car industry, period. It is incredibly special. The only problem with it, the reason I don't have it is it's $125,000 and it loses value very quickly. So I bought my 2012 model for $45,000. So if you figure the depreciation will be about the same, then a new one in 6 years is going to lose about $80,000 in value, and I can't afford those kind of losses. But it's an incredible car. Other favorite cars of mine, I mean, the Ford GT, I think, is a really, really special car. I still remember the very first time I drove one in Toronto to film a video. I drove it, and I always assumed it looked cool, but it was probably crap because it came out of Ford in 2005. I mean, they were building crap, but it isn't. I've driven all the other cars from that era, the 430, the Gallardo, etc., 911 Turbo. GT is by far a better car to drive. Not just cooler to look at, which I think everybody agrees about, but better to actually drive than those cars. And I kind of consider the GT to be sort of like a budget price Carrera GT. They both came out 04, 05, 06. They were both, production was cut short for both of them because sales weren't there, and then over time, as the car became more digital and more automatic, people realized that that was sort of the end of a great thing, and they flocked to them, and the values of both of those cars have gone up. So I can't afford a Carrera GT. The Ford GT is sort of the budget-priced alternative for me. Not that it's budget-priced, but compared to $700,000, it certainly is. My Land Rover Defender is one of my favorites. This one's hard to explain if you're not into Land Rovers, but I am. Take the roof off, drive around my wife, my friends in San Diego here. It's always sunny, and it's just the best life experience you'll ever have, and it's a special car to do that with. In terms of cars that I don't own, my favorites, 2011 BMW 1 Series M. This car is one of the most special, exciting, fun, thrilling cars ever. It's the perfect size. You can throw it around, go through corners, have so much fun. The car is just a blast. I really wish I had one. I'd like to get one at some point. The M2 has come out, and it's actually a better car. It drives a little better. It's a little faster, but not so much that it's overkill. It's just the same ethos that made the 1M so good. But the reason the 1M to me is still better is it's special. It's more special. The M2 is a production car, serial production. I can go down to BMW dealer and buy one right now, lease one, whatever. And a lot of people do. But the 1M, they only made it for one model year. They only made 1,000 or 1,500 or however many. BMW didn't expect that car to be a success. They just thought, oh, well, let's throw an M car out in the 1 Series and whatever. And then, of course, it blew up. And obviously, the values are still where they were when it was new 7 years ago, showing that that was sort of a special car. So I actually think the M2 is better, but the 1M is almost as good in driving experience and way more special. So if you want to know my favorite cars, that's probably a ranked list for you right there. Carrera GT, Ford GT, the AMG wagon is incredible, Defender, the 1M. The other question that I get asked is, what cars surprised me the most? When I went to go drive them, wasn't thinking they'd be great, and then they turned out to be pretty incredible. And that to me is the most interesting question, because I do this a lot, so I have a pretty good idea of how these cars are all gonna be. And then sometimes you drive one and you're like, wow, that was really special. So what are those cars? I've made a little list here. Number one, by far, the car that surprised me the most, I was going to drive it, I thought it would just be a normal car, it turned out to be amazing, I still remember, is the latest Shelby GT350R. I'm not like a Ford guy. The GT's my first Ford. I'm not like obsessed with them, but that's an incredible car. And I still remember I showed up to drive the one I did film, and it was in the DC area, and it was kind of a gray day, and I was seeing one of my friends later that day, so just kind of wanted to get the video done. And then I drove the car, and I was like, this is incredible. The sound is amazing. I figured it would just be a Mustang. Turns out, it drives incredibly, as a lot of the new Mustangs do, but this thing is on the next level. That's a truly special car. A few others that really surprised me. Ferrari Portofino. I drove the California, driven the California T. Those were great, but the Portofino is really a step up. This is like supercar Ferrari territory from just 20 years ago. It is now just the most accessible Ferrari. That thing may be the base model, but it is a really, really good car. Another good one, the new Acura NSX. And I took some flack because I actually like this car. I have no qualms saying when I don't like a car. I'm not afraid to get blackballed by the manufacturer. I'm not afraid to have people disagree with me. But the new NSX, I heard a lot of negative stuff about it. Too expensive, nothing like the old one, whatever. I drove it and it's amazing. I think the big problem with this car was Acura just took so long to bring it to market that people had all of these assumptions about what it would be like. It's going to be a revival of the old one, the driver focused. And it turned out that it was sort of more of a competitor for, you know, modern supercars. And I agree that it isn't as special as the old one, but if you look at it from today's perspective, it's incredibly fast, it handles well, I think it looks great, and it's actually kind of a bargain when you put it up next to Ferraris and stuff like that that can cost $100,000 more. I was really surprised with the new NSX, and I've noticed they're starting to get pretty cheap used. They're starting to creep into the 150, 140, 130 range. When that car becomes 80, there's not going to be a better car deal on the market. Another one that really surprised me is the Mercedes-Benz SLS. I've driven a lot of AMG cars, I've owned a few, and every time I get in an AMG car, it's all engine. You know, I mean, my AMG wagon, I love it, but you know, it feels like a station wagon when you go around corners. You buy it because it has that giant 500 horsepower engine. And I figured the SLS would just be like a cool looking sports car version of that, but all engine, especially because the engine of that car is so massive and its front is so long. Well, it turns out the SLS is actually an amazing car to drive. Incredibly fun, incredibly gifted around corners, truly a special car that was made great in every respect. And I think that car is sort of deserves to be mentioned along with the Ford GT and the Carrera GT as some of the best cars that came out of that mid to late 2000s era. Another car that I loved in that same vein is the Mercedes CLK 63 Black Series. I've always loved how that car looks. I never really knew how it drives. The answer is it drives like it just wants to have fun all the time. It drives like an Australian Shepherd that just has been cooped up all day. You get out on the road and it's like, let's go, let's have fun. And you press the gas pedal and you just want to go a little and it's like, woo, the tail comes out. And I would love to get a CLK Black Series one day. It's not high on my list because I think it's a narrowly usable car, but I love that thing. Two more surprises, the Range Rover Velar. In terms of like practical, reasonable cars. I drove the Velar R Dynamic and the screens failed while I was driving it. I had to turn the car off, restart it, still wouldn't work, turn off, restart it, walk away, and it finally came back on. So it's a Land Rover. But what I wasn't expecting was how good it was to drive. It's a beautiful car and it looks great, but I just figured that would sort of be the end of it because that's how most Land Rovers I'm accustomed to are. They can be fast, but they're never dynamic, they're never fun. That's not true of the Velar. It's a thrilling car to drive. Even though you think X5M, you know, AMG in terms of performance SUVs, the Velar is in that world and probably better than those cars, and I think it looks better than all that stuff. The last car that really surprised me, believe it or not, was the Ferrari F40. I got in that car and assumed it would be a horrible driving experience, and I would hate it, and I just wanted to get the video filmed so I could have it and put it up and everybody could see it and enjoy it, and I didn't want to be a part of it. I thought it'd be awful. Actually, I spent about an hour and a half driving that car, and it drives great. And it's too bad that they're so expensive because I think it would be like a fun backroads canyon weekend toy for people who have money, you know, but not insane. And now those cars cost $1.5 million. And so nobody uses it that way. I mean, it's not a rational car to throw around on the back roads. But if it was cheap, even if it was only $300,000, that would be fun. You could do it guilt-free. But when the car costs $1.5 million and each mile loses $1,000 in value or whatever it is, you can't justify that, which is too bad. But I really thought that car would be horrible, and it is tight, and there's no AC, and you're sweating. But I think that car could be just as fun as a nice Cayman, something mid-engine, something fairly tossable, which is crazy to think because it's like one of the all-time greatest Ferraris and greatest supercars. But it's actually just it was a fun car, and it wasn't excessively overpowered. Everything was good about it. Steering was very connected. I like that thing for more than just, you know, what it has become. I actually like driving it. And so those are my favorite cars, my biggest surprise cars, and the best cars that I've ever reviewed. And that's pretty simple. If you have any other questions, as I'm sure you do, send me an email, MoreDougDeMuro@gmail.com. And every week or two, I'm going to post one of these videos where I answer 1 or 2 questions from people that I get. And that was this week's.